In this hype beast gun era, everyone has kind of agreed that the 2011 is king, but it's kind of not in a couple major ways. And I'm gonna tell you why you shouldn't get a 2011 as a guy whose favorite platform is the 2011. And I'm gonna do a follow-up video on why you shouldn't get a Glock as well, but first, I'm gonna ask that you kindly check your subscription status. YouTube has been unsubscribing people, and about 70% of you guys aren't subscribed. It'd be super cool if you guys could do that. And before we go into why 2011s are terrible, first let's just take a minute to kind of dispel the misinformation that floats around on the internet. It's interesting because on social media, everybody is like, yeah, FUD lore in gun stores, dumb say these dumb things, but we do the exact same thing on places like Reddit and Facebook and even Instagram, just everywhere that gun guys get together. If they're really into guns but aren't like high burn shooters, they just kind of repeat the stuff that may have been true 15 or 20 years ago, but aren't necessarily true today. So I want to talk through some of those and then we'll get into why these guns are terrible. 2011s are unreliable and their magazines are terrible. That was very true back in the day, but it's really a phenomenon that was more centered in competition shooting back in the day when 2011s only showed up in shooting competitions. Around the time that STI rebranded into Staccato, there was major upgrades in the magazine field. The old STI magazines are what people were referring to with the issues that they had. When Staccato rebranded, they retooled their magazines, and around the same time, there started to be a lot of people entering the magazine production game that have made just completely reliable out-of-the-box magazines. The issue that you get into with like feed lips tuning and all that kind of stuff is really centered around competition shooters. If you have a competition gun with an absolutely flower pot mag well, as you see there, when people are practicing reloads, they're crashing the feed lips generally into the back of the mag well, and that is pinching them together or causing the fronts to flare out as a result of it. And that is what a lot of the rumors about 2011 mags being terrible come from, is competition shooters who do a lot of high-speed reloads with fully stuffed magazines are destroying the feed lips on their guns. That's not unique to 2011s, however. I used to compete with a CZ, and the oldest mags that I have all started having battered feed lips as a result of smashing magazines onto the base of that gun trying to go fast on reloads. So it's not a phenomenon that's unique to 2011s, but it is probably more centered into guns that have a metal mag well or at least a metal grip. The plastic guns just get their polymer grips chewed up, so there's that. The next rumor is that 2011s are unreliable. That was also true back in the day. You had to buy a lower cost 2011 and then spend time tuning it to get it to run. Again, around the time that Staccato became a thing, CNC machining had made major leaps, so the guns coming out of the box now are as reliable as just about anything else you could pick up. Caveat is that their operating window is narrower. We'll get there in the maintenance as well. 2011s, despite being reliable out of the box, are still not lawnmower guns, meaning that you can just, take them out, use them, put them back, and never ever clean them or oil them. You kind of have to clean and oil 2011s. We'll get into more of that in a minute. A lot of the malfunctions that you see with 2011s are due to slide velocity loss, and that's causing ammo to not eject properly or failing to extract or, just not going fully into battery. And that's a result of slide loss due to no oil in the gun. If you think about how a 1911 barrel locks up with the slide, same as a 2011, it's got those locking lugs that are just more prone to slide loss type malfunctions. Poor extractor fit, which we'll get to in a minute, can be another reason for that. So the first reason 2011 suck is maintenance. You can see this time lapse of me disassembling and cleaning my Glock 19 next to my Bull Armory Blaze competition gun. The round count since last cleaning for the two guns is roughly the same, but you can see that the Glock just takes about a third of the time as the 2011 does. That's right, it took 13 minutes for me to get the Bull clean, where it took about 4, and that's including the time to take off the ramjet and put it back on. It'd be like 3 if I didn't have a ramjet on that Glock. And that's because the 2011 geometry and how the gun works just has a lot more nooks and crannies where carbon builds up inside the gun. You've got to clean out the mating lugs on both the barrel and the slide so that the gun will lock up properly. It's a little more fiddly to get the Q-tips onto the slide rails in the frame. There's just a lot more places where you have to get the carbon off on a 2011 than you do with a modern service pistol like a Glock. And to compound that, the design of a Glock is basically built for neglect and abuse, meaning that if you don't ever clean it or lube it, it will generally work up until kind of the extreme when you shoot it so much that carbon builds up to the point that mating surfaces can't come into contact with each other. 2011s can't go that high. Around 1,000 rounds is kind of a stretch for a 2011 to go without a cleaning and lubing. You can do it just by keeping lube in the gun, but all that carbon gets in that oil and becomes a lapping compound. So if you have a super tight 2011 and you're not keeping the oil on the slide rails and slide clean, you're just basically introducing a lapping compound that is going to open up the tolerance on your very expensive gun. The next big hang up and kind of why I chose to make this video is that these guns are built around 45 geometry. What does that mean? Well, here's a 1911 45 mag, here is a 2011 45 mag, and here is a 9mm 2011 mag. You notice they are all the same height, and that is requiring the grips to be absolutely massive, but more importantly than that is it causes feeding issues. Back in the day, 1911 Smiths didn't like 9mm for 1911 guns because it was really, really difficult to get to feed into a 9mm barrel. If you think about a 2011, the bore height is the same on this 9mm gun as it would be on a 45 gun, which is why the bull barrels, and forgive me, but it's why the bull barrels are so absolutely fat on the 9mm guns, which means that that round has to go from the same place that a 45 cartridge is held up into the chamber. So 1911 Smiths back in the day developed ramped barrels, which is what's used in 9mm 2011 guns, but they still require cartridges to be loaded longer for them to work reliably. Most factory ammo will work in a 2011 gun, but the very short hollow points may have issues. Even my Staccato P, when I was testing different hollow points back when the Prodigy came out, even the Staccato P had an issue feeding some of the shorter jacketed hollow points. I think it was a SIG V Crown. The 2011s will just have a better time with longer loaded ammo that typically isn't loaded that long from the factory because other guns like the CZ and the Tanfolios require shorter ammunition to feed. It's just kind of a mess. So that feed ramp geometry is causing bullet setback. It depends on the design of the ramp. The reason I made this video was just a couple weeks ago, I was competing in a match where I was shooting Federal Champion 115, and I had a malfunction where it unload and show clear when I was done with the stage. I would pop the round out of the chamber, load it back into the magazine, and go again. Federal Champion 115 with the geometry of the feed ramp on the Bull Armory Blaze is just having marked setback. If you see here, I'm chambering the round 3 times, and it takes quite a bit of length out of the cartridge each time I chamber it. Eventually, if you keep doing that, you're getting an overpressure round or a round that simply won't feed with the long feed ramp on the 9mm guns. So I tested it with the Bull Armory Blaze and my Staccato C2, which I don't have in the room with me now, and the Federal Champion in the Blaze was getting shorter and shorter each time I tried it with 3 chamberings. I tried it with Federal HST 124s. There really wasn't much setback in either gun with that. However, the Federal Champion in the Staccato C2 ran well. I also tested it with the Vanta 9 and the MPA DS9, and there were varying results. So if you're the kind of guy who has a fancy gun and is unloading carry ammo and loading range ammo into it, keep an eye on what it's doing to your projectiles. It's not unique to 2011s, although a 9mm feed 1911 type design is a little bit harsher on setback than most guns that are designed around 9mm natively. But I'd recommend, if you are the kind of guy who's routinely unloading his carry gun, doesn't matter if it's a 2011 or not, go sacrifice one of the rounds of your carry ammo and just repeatedly chamber it when you've got a set of calipers and measure how much setback you're getting. Because if you get too much setback, you can blow out the case. Ask me how I know.
Oh, he's 9.
Well, that's not good. And before going on, remember when you saw The Sound of Freedom? Well, the guy that movie is based on started a charity called Operation Underground Railroad, or OurRescue.org. I'm actually competing in a charity match coming up in July of 25. I would love it if you would partner with me and sponsor me in that. And we're just raising money for Operation Underground Railroad. There's a link in the description and pinned in the comments where you can donate. I don't get a single cent of this. It's 100% for charity. So I'm calling on the dads to step up and help contribute to a very worthy cause. It would be kind of a cool thing to do before Father's Day. Okay, the next issue is extractors. So you can see that this Kimber 2K11 has an external extractor right there on the outside, whereas this Fowler Industries Vanta 9 does not. When the Army back in around 1911 was evaluating the 1911 design, they requested that he put the extractor on the inside of the pistol so that the rank and file soldier wouldn't mess with it. And that's why it's on the inside. It's not because Browning thought it was a good idea, it's because the Army didn't want soldiers to mess with it. Problem with that is the internal design extractors require tensioning, and that tensioning is a manual process. If it's not done well at the factory, like here is a lower cost MAC DS, I don't even know what they call these guns, MAC DS9, it's one of the Turkish like staccato clones. This was a gun that didn't have good extractor tension out of the box and required adjustment. It can lead to an issue where if the tension is too high, the round won't feed and slide up under the extractor claw, or if it's too loose, then the case will get caught in the slide as the action's trying to cycle. It's not very difficult to adjust, but if you're going to have a 2011 or a 1911 as one of your main shooting guns, you have to understand how to both check for and adjust extractor tension if it has an internal extractor. The external ones make a lot more sense. Kimber with their 2K11 and Staccato with their revised C series and I believe their HD series of pistols all have external extractor. Talking to the Kimber engineers about why they made that choice, it's cheaper to produce and it's significantly more reliable. At SHOT Show, the Staccato guy told me the exact same thing, that the extractors just run longer without needing adjustment. The next one is sort of an oldie but a goodie. I'm gonna keep using the Kimber gun because I think it's pretty. It seems like the internet recently rediscovered something that 1911 guys have known for forever, and that is that if you drop a 2011 or 1911 on the muzzle and it hits on the muzzle, the firing pin will make contact with the primer and ignite the primer. It only happens on muzzle drops because the inertia of, a 40-ounce gun coming to the ground, then stopping suddenly, the little firing pin keeps moving and comes forward and hits the primer because a Series 70 gun does not have a firing pin block. But the internet found out about it, you know about it now. So it's just something you have to consider when you're doing your own risk analysis on making a carry selection. The next issue is that the guns are just freaking big, and this comes back to the 45 ACP geometry design of the pistols. The grips are just massive because it was designed to run a double column of 45 ACP. I get questions routinely from people who have medium or small size hands asking as to whether their hands will fit on a 2011. Out of the box, the answer is probably no. A lot of 2011 grips are kind of big out of the box, although in recent years there's been kind of a slenderizing process going on where the grips are getting kind of smaller. This is the Valentine grip from Fowler and it's pretty slim. MJD makes an amazing polymer grip that is a little bit smaller. The Bull Armory grips just feel a little bit narrower, almost like a 1911 pistol and less like a 2011. Chile makes reduced size grips as well for people with small hands, and because the gun is super modular, you can swap out the trigger for short reach triggers as well. You can make it fit your hand, but out of the box, if you're a smaller handed shooter, just realize that you're on the hook for probably another $400 to $500 on getting that grip to fit your hands. And the next one's gonna be cost. A cheap 2011, like kind of the Turkish ones, are gonna go for about $1,000. There's the Thesis gun that is more in line with what a service pistol costs, but the fit on the Turkish guns just isn't the same as, when you get into kind of that next level of pricing, that kind of $1,000 to $1,500, that includes the Prodigy in that. And while there's a few guns in that kind of $1,000 price range, when you get up to about the $2,000 price range is where you start to get into good 2011 pistols. And what the difference is going to be is just the fit and finish is a lot tighter on the guns. They're more uniform and more consistent. The extractors are generally going to be tensioned properly when they come to you. The coatings are going to be higher speed, like the Staccato P that I have here. This is a DLC coating. It's the best weapons finish there is, and that DLC is over all of the small parts. Similarly, in that bucket comes the Kimber sort of 2K11. There's the GP Arms Patriot. The Bull Armory guns are kind of in that same price point. And then it just goes wildly up from there, where you can spend, $5,000 to $10,000 on some kind of crazy pistol. So there's that. And it's not just that. I mean, the parts are expensive as well. A cheap 2011 magazine would be the Checkmate magazines. It's honestly my preference for a inexpensive magazine. It came out with 19 round, 126 millimeter ones that you should know about. Those are pretty cool. But $46 for a cheap magazine is still, you know, nearly 2x what a properly cheap magazine is. The competition 2011 magazines like the MBX and the Atlas tubes, those are like 120 to 150 bucks. Like, they're super expensive. And staying on this whole, like, 2011s cost a lot. If you want to change out the internals on the gun to do like trigger work or anything like that, everything's expensive. If you get a matched hammer and sear, that's like 150 bucks. You got to get, you know, a leaf spring, a recoil spring, a main spring, and all that to say, like, just the parts for getting a 2011 trigger job are going to be like $150 to $200. It's a lot of money. It's not like just buying a connector for a Glock that's like $25 or $30 and then 2 springs that are like $7 a piece. So the trigger jobs on hammer fired gun just inherently cost more because there's more parts involved. Keeping it going on parts, a lot of 19 and 2011 price point pistols will have metal injection molded parts. That's probably more of an issue. This is going back to kind of the misinformation thing. That was probably more of an issue back in the day, 20 years ago, than it would be today, because metal injection molded parts are used a lot in firearms at this point. The process has gotten a lot better, and the parts are roughly about 95% as strong as a machined part. And generally, the fit on a metal injection molded part would be super sloppy, but that's not what they're doing anymore. What they do is they oversize the critical areas of fitment on the metal injection molded parts, and then they use a precision grinder to take the fit to be basically perfect. When you get ambi safeties, they precision grind all of the contact points so that it's going to match up with the sear, it's going to match up with the hammer, so that it can just be assembled rather than, you know, fit as it's put into the gun. Some of my old competition Bull Armory guns have 25, 30,000 rounds on them with metal injection molded parts. The only part that broke was the ambi safety after a couple years of use, and ambi safeties on 2011s will break anyway, even with machine parts. The machine ones tend to go a little bit longer, but they break as well. And the metal injection molded parts kind of come into 2 batches, the stuff that doesn't matter and the stuff that does matter. The stuff that doesn't matter is going to be like the firing pin stop, the grip safety, the slide stop, the ejector. They're all parts that, in my experience, aren't going to break. As I mentioned, my first open gun had metal injection molded slide stop that's got over 30,000 rounds on it of 9 major, and it's still going strong. The only slide stop that I've broken was due to bad heat treat on a machined part from a manufacturer you would know. The parts that probably matter more are going to be like your hammer and your sear, if those are metal injection molded, because they're 95% as strong. You can't restone them to get the really aggressive geometry for the very aggressive trigger jobs. So those parts probably need to be swapped depending on how crazy you're trying to go on your trigger. But generally speaking, if you don't change the geometry on those parts, they're fine. And finally, keeping on parts is parts interchangeability. These guns are fit, and so as a result, there's no guarantees that you can take 2 guns of the same model and just swap the parts interchangeably. The fit on the guns is so tight that you have to make sure that everything is going to fit together. If you want to swap safeties, you got to fit them. If you're going to do pretty much anything on the gun, you're going to have to fit or tune the part as it goes on your individual snowflake gun. It's not like a Glock where you could take 5 of them, take them all the way down to pins and springs, mix them up, and then put them back together and they'll all work. That's not how these guns are built. So if you're somebody who's going to be wrenching on their own guns, you're going to become a 1911 Smith in pretty short order if you start trying to wrench on them. That all said, this is my favorite platform of gun. I think they are the best shooting gun. They are the coolest gun. They just provide a thing about them in the shooting experience that you just don't get with a mass-produced service style gun. The triggers are unrivaled. There is not a platform that has a better trigger than the almighty 1911 trigger. The guns, when they're made well, are generally more accurate than service guns. However, since the 2017 MHS trials for the Army, the service guns have gotten markedly better and closed that gap significantly, but generally, these are a little bit more accurate. They just strike me as something that's like heirloom quality in an era where everything is like mass produced for consumption and then just kind of thrown away. That's kind of how I feel about service guns now. Whereas like I could leave this gun to my kids and it would be a super amazing gun for them into the future as well. It's kind of like the, you know, watch collecting game, like this little silly smartwatch that I use will tell time as well or better than the expensive, you know, luxury watches, but the luxury watch provides an experience that's unlike my stupid little this is how many unread messages you have watch that I wear. If you enjoyed this video, be sure you're subscribed to check out the Glock video when it drops in a couple weeks. In the meantime, maybe you can check out this video on the Bull Armory Blaze. I appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.